So Conrad, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. I I have to say, it's January and it feels like it's been January for such a long time. Michael the other day told me, he said, 30 days has September, April, June, and November, except for February, which has 28, and January, which has 967 days. And that's what it truly feels like.
It really does, yeah. I always say it's the Monday of the year, and I hate it with a passion.
It's the worst. It reminds me, years ago, Red Letter Media did one of my favorite videos of all time, which is F you, it's January. They talk about all the really crappy films that come out in January. So, like, studios save it up and they just dump it. Like, it wasn't worthy of Oscars or any of that. So they're just like, here's all of our crap.
Yeah, piles of trash.
Exactly.
I love it. Well, Christmas feels like a long time ago, but have
It
you followed up on our Christmas episode in any
I
way?
did, yes. So I was listening to that episode just the other day, and I remembered that you had told me about the John Lewis Christmas adverts, and I was like, I never went and listened to that. So this morning, I looked it up, and in the episode, you say, I challenge anyone to watch that 2012 Snowman John Lewis Christmas advert and not cry. And I was like, I'm not going to cry. I'm in a great mood. I've been watching Cop Rock for a month. I'm in a great mood. And I watched that thing, and I tell you, I was just weeping. You nailed it. Like, oh my God, I'll never be the same.
No, it is of a guaranteed weepy, that one. And I think it was very influential because after that, breathy women with piano and string ballad versions of 80s songs was just the thing to do in movie trailers. Every single movie trailer that year and the year after. Ugh,
Yeah.
I love it. It's beautiful.
It's really, really beautiful. So thank you for making me aware of its existence. I guess thank you
Yes.
and damn you. Kind of how I feel about this topic. So,
Okay.
um, welcome to Dreamland, everyone. We are, as many of you already know, we're talking about Cop Rock and the Singing Detective today. And this all kind of came about because back when Conrad was visiting us here in the States, he and I were sitting in the kitchen one day, and I don't even remember. Do you remember how this came up? I think for some reason I asked you if you'd ever heard of Cop Rock, and you looked at me like I was insane. Understandable.
Yes. Yeah. So you went on to explain the lunacy that is cop rock, which we will experience tonight. But um, I said, it's funny, because the idea of a musical TV show that did actually happen in the UK quite a few times. It's rare, but a few times. And there is one that's kind of a landmark. And then when I looked up cop rock on Wikipedia, it mentioned that it was inspired, or one of the inspirations was the show that I'm going to talk about. So we thought, there's our January episode.
Yeah, exactly. So Conrad, really quickly, this is Rock Follies and Tutti Frutti. I think this is where you were, right?
It is, yeah. So this is amazingly Emma Thompson in a musical, which I never thought I'd see, but there we go.
Wow.
It was,
Okay, now that I'm not having a panic attack, I can see that, and that's crazy. Emma Thompson, by the way, with like a red, short 80s hairdo thing going on. Like,
yeah, and a
wow.
shawadi waddy jacket. It's
And
amazing.
he
And a
looks like he's
guitar.
wearing a Jiffy Pop outfit too.
It's all Jiffy Pops all the way down.
It's just Jiffy Pop from top to bottom.
Yeah, for some reason.
Hmm.
So this one was written by the late Scottish playwright and screenwriter John Byrne.
Hmm.
It was later adapted for stage, and it was unavailable for streaming or physical media for many, many years after its initial broadcast in 1987 because of a copyright clearance issue with Little Richard,
Oh, little.
of course, which was finally resolved in 2009.
So when you're talking to little Richard, do you say to him, "Do you mind if I call you little?" Anyway, sorry, that was a terrible joke.
Or
Please go.
Mr. Richard, sir. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, of course, this sort of putting a band together and therefore there are musical numbers in the show approach is not a new one. The aspiring filmmakers Bob Raffleson and Bert Schneider came up with the idea in the early 60s when they created the Monkees.
Mm, I
In
love
this case, yeah, the show centered around a fictitious band that quickly dominated the charts. And Spice Girls manager Simon Fuller in the UK essentially did the same thing in the late 90s with the formation of S Club 7, who rose to fame through their children's TV series Miami 7, which first aired on children's BBC in 1999 in the UK, and as S Club 7 in Miami on Fox Family. Were you glued to that one, Melinda?
Absolutely not. No,
No.
I've never heard of that, but I did watch a lot of terrible musical TV shows, which I'll talk very briefly about in my section. But yeah, that's
Ah,
crazy. I did
okay.
watch Monkeys. They were weirdly on like I think Nick, whatever Nick at Night or Nickelodeon back in the day used to show old TV shows, including things like Mr. Ed, but also the Monkeys.
Ah, yeah. I know what you mean. I used to see things like that, and I Love Lucy all being sort of syndicated on some channel or other.
Right.
But still, the idea of a TV show that functioned like a musical in the style of Broadway or Golden Age Hollywood movies was rare. TV shows would occasionally experiment with the form by using a supernatural event or a character's altered mental state to justify a musical episode.
Right.
Some examples here you may be familiar with: Xena the Warrior Princess, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Not sure you've heard of that one.
Never heard of that.
No. And Scrubs apparently had a musical number
And the show
in.
Lucifer had a musical episode.
That's right. I saw that when I was doing my research. I thought, I bet you enjoyed that.
I didn't actually. It's my least favorite episode of that show, but I think the difference being, and I haven't seen the Xena or the Scrubs, but of course I know the Buffy one very well. And Buffy's episode has unique new songs made just for the episode
Mm.
versus the Lucifer one was more them performing already existing songs. And so we'll be talking about that as a way into this as well, because that's a comparison, right, between singing detective and cop rock.
It is. Yeah, very much so. So, speaking of the singing detective, so the singing detective is hailed as the Citizen Kane of TV in the
Yeah.
UK. And some of the write ups that I read, Britain's most innovative television script writer created it. It's Dennis Potter. He was born in the Forest of Dean, which is an area in the west of England. So just imagine the characters in Lord of the Rings.
You
That
say that he looks very elven, like so. I kind of picture him like living as a gnome in the woods. He was lived in the hollow of a tree.
for me, he looks somewhere between Austin Powers and Emperor Palpatine. But
You nailed it! Oh my god! So if you're listening to this on a podcast, just imagine those three things just sort of combined. That's exactly what we're looking at.
right, bless him,
Yes, bless.
Dennis Potter. He's no longer with us, sadly.
Oh,
He was the precocious child uh, at odds with the working class environment and the free church in which he was raised.
what is
He was
that?
blessed with super intelligence.
What is a free church? Like as opposed to what?
I don't know. It's probably one of those phrases that where, they say the thing that they're exactly not.
Oh, okay.
Where it's like a really super strict church, but they just say, let's just call it free.
Oh, I was thinking they just didn't charge to get in. Okay. Well, that's probably more of an American thing anyway.
Well,
Okay.
so yes, he was a very intelligent, he was a very bright kid. And so he tended to anger authority figures at Oxford
Uh-huh.
with his socialist leanings. And then when he became a writer, he often provoked anger from censors and critics and viewers alike because he tackled taboo subjects with, at the time, shocking bluntness, which is fun.
Yeah.
So
And I can see that just based on a little bit of the show that I watched.
it caused quite the stir. The Singing Detective. So if you've never heard of it, you are in for a treat. It's a 6-part miniseries. It aired on BBC One in November and December of 1986. And it focuses on a pulp thriller writer called Philip Marlowe,
Yep.
aptly enough, played by the late Michael Gambon in a career defining role. In fact, it's so synonymous with him here that instead of showing Harry Potter movies over Christmas, although I'm sure they were on somewhere, but instead of showing those to mark his passing this year, because we lost Michael Gambon, because of course he played Dumbledore after Richard Harris passed, they showed The Singing Detective. So in the UK, if you're listening to this, or if you have BBC iPlayer through virtual private network fun, it's on the iPlayer at the moment if you want to catch it. So yeah, you've got a chance to see it. Marlowe suffers from, and excuse me if I don't pronounce this correctly, psoriatic arthropathy.
You nailed it. That's exactly right.
Oh, phew,
Well
thank
done.
goodness.
That's not an
I
easy.
don't want to get these things wrong in front of a nurse. Okay. A hereditary disease that during flare ups causes his joints to swell and his skin to blister, crack, and flake. And he looks quite hideous in the show. The makeup is amazing. The
Yes.
the drama covers a period of convalescence for him and treatment in hospital, during which his delirious state of mind, because he's hallucinating, he's running a fever quite often, he's flashing between 3 alternative realities. So the show is split between 4 different worlds that he's experiencing at once. One of them is the hospital that he's in. You can see how grim he looks there, which sometimes feels like a British sitcom with a revolving cast of comic characters who share the ward with him, or a gritty documentary that's unflinching in its examination of how bad this condition is for him. Also, I'll try that again. A noir detective novel that he's written in the past and is in the process of rewriting or re-experiencing in his head, in which his alter ego, also played by Michael Gambon, is a cynical detective by day and a crooning club singer at night.
Mm-hmm.
The third world that it deals with is his childhood memories in the Forest of Dean, particularly focusing on a period where his unhappy mother decides to leave Marlowe's father and takes the boy with her to London, away from the squalor of the miner's cottage where the family are sharing with the grandparents. She doesn't get on with the in-laws. And later in the series, a present-day fantasy, a paranoid fantasy, where his ex-wife and a lover that he's imagined for her are trying to swindle him out of the proceeds from a screenplay based on The Singing Detective.
She looks like Sharon Osbourne.
Yes. It's
like a young Sharon Osbourne, like from the 80s, like during this time.
I think everybody had a perm and looked exactly the same
I
as
know,
that.
but like especially in that bottom picture, like where she's leaning over him, she really to me looks like I can just hear Ozzy Sharon in the background. You know? Sorry.
Yeah, and sometimes his complexion was like that as well, bless him.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's particularly brilliant about the show is how these 4 threads are interwoven so that they comment upon each other and reflect each other's themes and shed light on the central character's psyche. So as one of the actors, Patrick Malahide, described it, it's a psychological case study told as a detective story and set to music. Speaking of Patrick Malahide, like many of the actors in the show, he plays multiple roles. So he's Mark Binney, the singing detective's client in the noir novel. Sorry, he's Raymond, the man Marlowe's mother's having an affair with in his childhood memories, and he's Mark Finney, the man he imagines his ex-wife is colluding with in the present day to con him. And the roles that the characters play, because most of them are playing multiple characters in his fantasies and his fictions, it's revealing because they expose his guilt and his prejudices,
Hmm.
his attitudes towards the real people from his childhood memories who inspired the characters that he's creating in his fantasies and his fictions and his paranoid delusions. So it's quite telling the way that it's who plays who.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. And the central mystery of the show revolves around the death of a woman. Images of whose naked body being recovered from a river are repeated over and over again during the show, tastefully censored here.
Yes,
But
because
the
it's
idea,
not tastefully censored in the show.
no, it's not. Which was it was a huge shocker in the 80s that a public service broadcaster would broadcast. It was after the watershed, of course. So much nudity and frank depictions of sex. Episode 3 is notorious.
And like body parts as well, and not always just in a sexual way, but often in a sexual way, but not how you would expect. It just I only watched the one episode and I'm still scarred, you guys. Like I'm just
Yeah. I remember my grandfather was thrilled with episode 3 because he'd never seen anything like it, and certainly not on television. He thought it was amazing. Bless him. But yeah, so and again, because of the multiplicity of the realities, when the body, he keeps flashing back to this image of this body being pulled from the river, but the identity of who's pulled out changes. Sometimes it's his ex-wife, sometimes it's his mother, sometimes it's a prostitute from this noir fantasy that
right,
he's having. So, and it's interesting why it keeps being those people, and it's those different people for different reasons, for very different reasons, that you learn as the show unfolds,
right.
which is incredibly clever. I'm not going to spoil it. Watch it.
Yeah, it's not the most easy thing to get your hands on here in America, but I would say that it's definitely worth it. Now, it's super dark. So
Mm.
it's not like it's completely the antithesis of cop rock in the sense that cop rock generally is sort of laughable in a lot of ways, but this show I was I have to tell you I watched the first episode just to get an idea of like what it was like, and at the end I remember thinking, "Wow, that was shockingly amazing, and I'm really glad I don't have to be the one that has to watch all the other episodes because it is really a bummer."
It gets better. It's actually about his recuperation.
Right.
So it does get
I
better.
was weeping in the first episode. Like there's a moment which I think you'll sort of I think you have one image of it, and
Mm.
I'll stop you there because anyway, go ahead.
It's incredibly complex. I'd never seen it before because, I mean, when it first aired, I was far too young because it was, yeah, I wasn't watching stuff like this when I was a kid.
Yeah,
So I would hear about it, but I just never got around to watching it. And it wasn't easy to get hold of here either. I think it's on DVD now, but maybe out of print. So
right.
I watched it for this show and just thinking, this will be interesting, maybe a bit of a chore, but it'll be interesting because I don't really like musicals. But then I watched it and thought, my goodness, this is genius. This is
Does it really
really powerful.
feel like a musical? Because I mean, it doesn't function like what I think of as a Broadway musical. It doesn't have that kind of feel to it, and the songs, I don't know. Maybe it's I only saw one episode, and I only remember one big number in that one episode.
Yeah, they proliferate as it goes on, for
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So the art tellingly imitates the author's own life. Potter himself was diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis when he was 26, and he had many extended stays in hospital. He also grew up in the Forest of Dean. He was also the son of a miner, and of course, he was a writer who examined his own psyche through his fiction. But Potter resisted suggestions that the show was autobiographical. But despite that, director John Amiel who directed all 6 episodes of the show, went on to direct Hollywood movies like Copycat. He noted in the commentary that following a day-long table read of the show, once they finished, the cast just sat in silence, just stunned silence for a moment until Potter finally broke it and said that he had no idea how close to the bone it was until he heard it performed.
Yeah.
So it has a many layered examination of sex and guilt. It's a compelling story of a man's art and his therapy as a cure for his mental and physical illnesses. And as well as being insightful and moving, it's also wryly funny, entertaining, and deeply, deeply weird.
Yeah,
So,
like in Twin Peaks, like I feel like it more was
yeah,
like Twin Peaks because when I was watching, I was like, this feels very Lynchy, like David Lynchy.
it really does. And
Yeah.
when you say, if you say a detective story mixed with a soap opera or a sitcom in which the central mystery revolves around the death of a young woman whose naked body is found in a river, I mean, you're
Yeah, it's
you're going to think Twin Peaks.
yeah, see, I feel like this is the DNA of that, although there is an interesting tie between Twin Peaks and Cop Rock, which we'll get to as well. So these are all kind of
Ooh.
connected. Yeah.
So, part of the hallucinatory fabric of the show, as we've mentioned, is its habit of breaking out into musical sequences, also part of his delirium, in which the cast lip sync to songs from the 1940s, which Dennis used to listen to when he was growing up. Now, he developed this approach before in a show called Pennies from Heaven, another 6-part miniseries, which was broadcast in '78 and starred a very young Bob Hoskins. It was later as adapted as a feature film for Hollywood, starring Steve Martin in 1981, which bombed, unfortunately.
Oh.
Yeah, there's a history of that. We'll get onto that. So his musical numbers challenge the naturalist approach that had reigned supreme on British TV, particularly for kitchen sink dramas and soap operas that focused on the everyday lives of working class people. Potter intended the musical numbers to stimulate the audience by challenging their expectations and breaking the fourth wall. But he used songs that people would recognize rather than original songs so that it didn't alienate them completely. And also because he loved the songs, let's be honest.
Yeah.
They also helped express the idea of a surreal alternative reality, and it creates, as you say, it's very Lynchian. I'm thinking actually of Dean Stockwell lip syncing to Roy Orbison's "In Dreams" in Blue Velvet, which oddly enough came out in the same year as this. Sometimes it's also incredibly disturbing.
So this is the moment. This is in the first episode. This whole sequence, and I mean, I don't know. I don't want to cut you off, but like this
No.
sequence, I was like weeping because the image on the left is, the guy is laying in bed. He's got all the skin peeling. He's in a lot of pain. He can barely move, and these doctors come in with like it's like a teaching hospital, and so they're all just sort of talking about him like he's not in the room, which is a real problem in the medical profession. And he's like, "Can I say something?" And he starts explaining how he just can't bear it anymore. And he's like, "If you can't make me feel better, I'd rather just die." And I mean, he's like near tears, and he's such a good actor that I was like, I was about to cry. And then right when it gets you to that point of like this poor man, like it's just awful what he's going through, and he does such an amazing job of conveying that emotion. Suddenly everyone, his fever is spiking, and they all start singing and dancing, and the curtain behind them opens, and then suddenly it's like a 1940s dance club where everyone's singing dim bones, dim dry bones. It's like, oh my god, what just happened? And that's when I was like, this is like on another level of
Yeah.
film. I don't want to call it filmmaking because it's not film, but it is kind of. It's filmic.
It is, yeah. It's shot entirely on film. Now, Dennis
Mhm.
Potter didn't like that. He wanted the interior scenes to be shot on video to make it look even more like a sitcom, and then all of the noir stuff to be shot on film. But the only way they could attract a director of the caliber of John Amiel is if they shot the whole thing on film. So it's all on film. So speaking, as Michael was referring to 4K rejuvenation, somebody needs to scan this film and put it back out there because it is just a work of genius. But yeah, that sequence where the curtain goes back and there's just nurses as dancing girls and the whole ward is there, but it's like a glitzy nightclub as well with like
They're playing
neon
the
signs.
xylophone on skeletons.
It's it's funny, but it's also really
It
disturbing.
really is. It's like because you can see on his face when it starts that he's like, oh no, because he
Yeah,
knows that he's hallucinating. And so I think that's why it works so well is that it's not purely a musical. It's like he is hallucinating these musical numbers and it's pulling in yet another part of what's in your brain because music stays in your brain in a different place than, you know,
yeah,
regular memories. So,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just spirals the whole
yeah.
sequence.
Wow.
But an amazing performance by the whole cast of this hospital. So yeah, very impressive.
That scene reminds me of The Shining a little bit from that angle too. Like the just the film, the what do you call it? The cinematography. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's Dean Stockwell in Blue Velvet, as I was referring to earlier. Very
Hmm.
similar. It's the lip syncing as well, the disembodied voice. That's sort of uncanny as well. I think that makes it sort of disturbing too. But sometimes it is just openly disturbing. So this is a scarecrow that just
No,
his
it's
head
not.
pops
No,
up.
it's not. That is
It
a
just
nightmare.
yeah, he just pops up in one of the episodes and starts singing as the young Marlowe is taken away from the place that he loves on a train, and it's just all kinds of nightmare fuel. It's absolutely terrifying.
You know what this makes me think is that they should really redo The Wizard of Oz as a horror film, and then this guy could be the Scarecrow. Because can you imagine? Like,
Yeah. Oh
anyway,
yeah. No, absolutely. It's it's just right
horrible.
there, isn't it?
It's yeah, it's really upsetting. He's got the white eyes, like clearly contacts in there, and white face, and whoa,
Yeah, it's deeply unpleasant.
yes.
So the whole thing is an indisputable masterpiece. If you hadn't seen it, which, as I said, I hadn't before researching this episode, I highly recommend you do. It's got an amazing cast. Now, we've already mentioned Dumbledore, but there's a lot of Harry Potter in here. There is a very young David Thewlis, Remus Lupin as a soldier who makes unwelcome advances towards Marlowe's mother on the train that I just mentioned,
Mhm.
and Dolores Umbridge herself.
First thing I said, I was like, "Oh my god, that's Dolores Umbridge."
Yes, Imelda Staunton, also now the Queen in The Crown
Of
on
course, yeah,
Netflix, as a strict matronly nurse who's absolutely terrifying throughout. She's perfect at it because
really
Imelda
good.
Staunton's just an amazing actress. Um, but there are some other familiar faces that crop up during the show. So, memorably, a nurse who has to slather Marlowe with KY or whatever it is that
It's a
she's
very
using.
thick lotion. It's not really lotion. It's almost like a grease.
Yeah, to to soothe his skin. Yeah, all over. And we mean everywhere. And it has
Yeah,
unfortunate side effects,
yeah.
which he finds deeply embarrassing. And it's that nurse is played by a very young Joanne Whalley, who, of course, is in Willow and then became Joanne Whalley Kilmer for a while. And we also have, for fans of Timothy Dalton's first James Bond outing, The Living Daylights, we have Thomas Wheatley, who memorably played the ill-fated Saunders, and he's there as one of the registrars who sings "Dem Bones, Dem Bones."
Right. Wow.
So there you go.
Wow.
The show has a considerable legacy. Dennis Potter revisited the format again, so he's done a trilogy of these musicals. The third one was in 1993 and it was called Lipstick on Your Collar. It focused on the Suez Canal crisis.
Okay.
Okay. And kick-started the career of an incredibly young Ewan McGregor. Look at him. Oh,
What a baby
very.
face.
Yes, he's very cute.
Oh, he is.
Since then, there have been other shows that have tried to recapture the same formula. There's one called Blackpool, which I have never seen, which was broadcast as Viva Blackpool in the US and then was remade as Viva Laughlin. Laughlin?
Yeah, Laughlin. Hmm.
Okay. That adopts a similar approach. Had quite the cast. Hugh Jackman was in the US version, but it was cancelled fairly quickly. And Potter also loosely adapted the screenplay for The Singing Detective for a Hollywood film directed by Keith Gordon and starring Robert Downey Jr. in 2003. It was largely considered an interesting failure,
Hmm.
which is a
Yeah.
shame.
Yeah.
So both of his big screen outings have not met with success. I think he was more of a series guy. I think he needed the space of a 6 hour stretch.
I feel like there's so much to explore based on just what you were describing that I don't know if you could really effectively fit it in like 2 hours, 2.5 hours.
I don't think so. I haven't seen this version of it, but I can't say I'm particularly compelled to. Maybe I will, but the series is just so damn good.
Mhm.
It's hard to bring myself to watch an alternative version of it. So yeah, so this landmark of the 80s in the UK, and then we were delighted to discover that it was an inspiration for something that happened across the pond.
Yes, yes, it was, and they're almost the same show. No, um, so I spent a ton of time immersed in the product of the inspiration that this show gave. Um, for a whole month, I've been looking at this, and so you're in for a real treat today. So I think at this point, Conrad, you're just ready to sit back and just watch and consume the joy that is cop rock, right?
I can't wait. All I've heard is just the insanity. And I think I saw a clip on one of the late night shows. I think they showed a particular song about baby theft or something.
Yeah, well, one thing that I noticed is that first of all, let me just go ahead and start with John Oliver had a few years back, he did a small bit at the beginning of one of his longer pieces where he talked about cop rock. And that's where a lot of people who, whatever age they are, who had never heard of cop rock suddenly were aware of it and went and looked it up.
Okay.
And not long ago, it came out in 2016 with a DVD release, which is kind of frankly shocking that it even has a DVD release. But it's wonderful that it did because
Mm.
I was able to pull all of the footage that we'll be going through today. Now, everyone who talks about the show tends to show the same two or three little clips and talk about the same wacky parts. But let me tell you, I watched all 11 episodes of the show
Wow.
and there is a lot more than just those three clips that everyone talks about. So we're going to be doing a deeper dive. So let's start with Stephen Bochco. So Stephen Bochco, born in 1943 to a painter and a concert violinist in New York City. He began his career at Universal Pictures in the early 70s as a writer and then an editor on shows like Ironside, Columbo, and Macmillan and Wife. So you can already see a theme in the type of material that Stephen is very interested in. A lot of police procedural type stuff and really interesting detective type stuff. So, a decade later in 1981, he had a major success with Hill Street Blues, and he's probably most known for Hill Street Blues. So, it lasted from 1981 to 1987. So, he was a co creator, a writer, and a producer of this show, and it was nominated for 98 Emmy Awards over the run. So prior to this show, it was not common for US drama series to have meta plots. That's very common now. But back then, like in Columbo, for example, you didn't see a character that evolves over time. They're just standalone episodes, right? So they also didn't have large regular casts. They had just a couple of people, whereas this show really, this the big cast and crew thing, that's more for like nighttime soap operas. Think Falcon Crest and Dallas and Dynasty and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they kept um, they merged all those elements in Hill Street Blues, and it changed TV drama like forever going forward. So he then moved to 20th Century Fox and co-created and produced LA Law, which ran from 1986 to 1994. So again, another big cast, lots of meta plots. Um, and then he got a lucrative deal in 1987 with ABC to create and produce 10 new series, and he formed Stephen Bochco Productions. You can see the violinist, probably in honor of his father. And then because he was able to completely create 10 new series, he was like, wow, I can do anything I want. And even if it fails, it's not a big risk for me. So it really allowed him to try a lot of really interesting, different stuff, not all of which worked. But the first thing that it created was Doogie Howser. Look at little baby Neil Patrick Harris. Look at him. So
Oh,
cute. Um, so Doogie Howser MD ran from 1989 to 1993, and it again was a change from traditional comedies in that it was not in front of a live studio audience, and it didn't use a laugh track. And it was shot more like a film. So much like Hill Street Blues changed drama, Doogie Howser kind of changed comedy in that way, where some comedies were coming out from then that didn't have the laugh track and weren't
right.
even necessarily in front of the studio audience. So again, while some of these shows may be hit or miss in some ways, they did really open the doors for all kinds of other things that came after them. So of note, after this point, he seemed to continue his interest in pushing boundaries. So one example of this is NYPD Blue, which he created in 1993, and it ran until 2005. It intended to change the nature of 1 hour dramas on TV in order to compete with cable networks. And so in order to do that, they had to get a lot more mature and have a lot of what they considered very mature audience type stuff. So it was very controversial at the time, primarily for nudity and language, and even talking about alcoholism, which led to a bunch of FCC fines here. They were eventually overturned, but it was just big controversial show. And I remember everyone talking about it in the 90s. They always said, oh, well, they had a full frontal male nudity in the show. And I don't actually think it did. It was mostly just a lot of butts, people walking around cussing, using bad language. You can see a full butt, which
But in the
over here,
moonbeam.
oh no, right, exactly. But anyway, so the real reason we're here today is to talk about another one of Botchko's shows, which is Cop Rock. So I want to pause here and tie the show back directly to The Singing Detective. There's a quote that I came across in my research, which I thought was quite funny, from Stephen Bochco, and I wanted to read it. It says, "The Singing Detective really wasn't in my mind when I was developing Cop Rock, although I was a huge admirer. In fact, I once shared a stage with Dennis Potter, and he was a mess. He was dying. He had that terrible disease, pancreatic cancer, and he was drinking all through the evening. And he was very rude to me, actually, and I didn't care. I just thought, how cool is this? I'm on stage with Dennis Potter. I mean, he kept lambasting Cop Rock, but mostly he kept lambasting successful American television writers for how much money they made."
Yeah. Okay. I I believe the character that of Philip Marlowe again is a little bit more autobiographical than he intended because he is quite crotchety.
Yes. So, as Conrad said earlier, there were a lot of other similar shows that came before Cop Rock in the US, and they're mostly 30-minute comedies that usually had like one musical number per show, and they're often set up as a stage act. So it's more like a performance than a musical. Like it's not people walking around in their regular life singing. It's like they're a band and they go on stage. So
Yeah.
this is things like the Monkees from 1966, which you mentioned before. There was the show called That's Life that came out in 1968, which is the only outlier here. So it's a short-lived ABC. Again, this is on ABC, much like Cop Rock will be on ABC. So ABC series from 1968. It traced the courtship and marriage of a young couple through comedy sketches and musical numbers. And the show, in which Morse stars with E.J. Peeker, it was staged like a Broadway musical in front of a live audience. So they have this live audience, they have a street set up in one of the scenes, and he walks out. It looks like he's about to sing Singing in the Rain. Like he walks,
Wow.
and the audience starts cheering when he walks out. But there are people sort of dancing around, almost like in Once More with Feeling, the Buffy episode, when they're walking down the street, and there are people sort of moving about like you would in a, uh, like a musical type of scenario. So it really is very much an actual musical.
Yeah. I've not heard of that one. I'm not sure that made it over here.
Yeah, it was very short lived. And then, of course, you have the
Okay.
Partridge Family, which is another band scenario, and Fame, which you mentioned from 1982. And there was this weird show that I came across called Dreams. I'd never heard of it. And I have to mention it because it stars John Stamos and Jamie Gertz. And they're like this 80s band. This was in 1984. And it was directed by Bill Bixby. It was canceled
Oh,
after 5 episodes, but if you watch it, the first, I think several episodes are online. The first episode really gives me Against the Ninja vibes, like from, that terrible movie that's, God, it's a Misty type of movie, like a Riff Tracks movie. But yeah, it
yeah.
is just hilarious. So you should check it out if you like really cringy 80s stuff with John Stamos.
Yeah.
So anyway, the mythology is that back during his time on Hill Street Blues, um, our friend here, Stephen Bochco, a woman had come up to him with the idea of making Hill Street Blues into a Broadway musical. Now he doesn't remember her name or any of the details, and he didn't have the ability to do that at the time, but he always thought it was such a great, cool idea, and he really wanted to find a way to make it work. So he just kept it in his head and he tucked it away until he suddenly gets this 10 TV show deal with ABC. And he's like, ha, now I can do my Hill Street Blues musical. So that was his quick elevator pitch to all these people that he gets to be a part of Cop Rock. So ABC took this huge gamble with what was actually a very expensive show. An article from 1990, which is when the show comes out, in the LA Times noted that each episode costs a third more again than the $1 million it costs to produce LA Law, for example. So every episode cost like 1,300,000 and something thousand dollars to produce.
Wow.
Um, so, because of his earlier successes, the then head of ABC, a little person you may have heard of named Bob Iger, he signed off on it with trepidation. And this was helped by the success of Twin Peaks, which had come out earlier that year and was a success for ABC. So, Bob Iger also had signed off on this David Lynch Twin Peaks show that aired like it started in April, whereas our show, Cop Rock, starts in like September. So,
Right.
yeah,
Okay. So there is a connection
there is.
because Twin Peaks is not in any way a musical, but the music is such an important part of it and dancing and slightly hallucinatory parts of it. So yeah, you can see the connection.
Correct. And there is even I can't find a full version of it. I was so mad, but there was this little promo that ABC ran that was like one of those 30-minute, almost like an ad for their upcoming shows that they would do. And it had a whole bunch of behind the scenes, and it was for both Twin Peaks and Cop Rock, because I feel like the network probably saw them as like they're two weird shows that they were putting out. And so like 80% of the show was about Twin Peaks, and then they shoehorned Cop Rock in there because honestly, everybody thought from the get-go that this was a terrible idea except Stephen Bochco. Everybody, including, we'll talk about how he gets Randy Newman to do the theme song. I'm not a big Randy Newman fan, but he does the theme song, and he's a good musician, like he's a good writer, and he's like, this is a terrible idea, but because he's Steven Bochco, he's like, ah, come on, it's going to be great. So interestingly, NBC, so that was all on ABC. So NBC was taking a similar risk at the exact same time, um, with its also very short-lived musical show called Hull High. Now, all these photos that I'm showing are in black and white because this show, unlike Cop Rock, has not been released on DVD, and it's very, very hard to find clear, non-grainy, non-DVD, or even non-VHS level photos or images from the show that are in color. But it is set in a high school, and it sort of feels even more than Cop Rock like a music video, but it also has the advantage of even more like hip hop, and you've got really young people, teenagers. So it doesn't feel quite as jarring. So I watched a couple episodes. They're on YouTube, and it's high school. So it's not quite as dramatic as some of the stuff we'll be talking about here in just a minute.
Mm.
So anyway, it didn't last long and it didn't do well. But it's kind of a fun watch. They have the Hull High Devils. They act as a rap version of a Greek chorus. So they kind of are all out, hip hop dancing. I'm not going to actually do it because I'm super old and
It's another one of those shows where all the kids going to high school are all 20 years old.
yeah, it is. It's very Glee-ish in that way, like,
Mm,
but it's
yeah.
not. Yeah. So, or even what is a High School Musical, kind of like that.
Yeah.
So, but while it was a big risk for ABC to do Cop Rock, it was not so much so for Bochco, like I said. So that motivated him, like I said, to try something new and untested. So Cop Rock had 5 new songs every week,
Wow.
mostly recorded live on set. So
Oh, no.
they did not go into a studio and record these and then lip sync. They were singing them in the environments. So when I show you clips, these people are singing these things in situ. Like they are singing it with all of that action going on. They would have mics run under their like lav mics, and they would be performing and dancing and whatever they're doing.
Oh, gosh. They Les Mis'd it. Wow.
Yeah, they did. So they were mostly recorded on set live. So 2 of the songs were big productions, usually every week, and the others were more scaled back. So you'll have a lot of those where, like, as a person sitting next to a bed or sitting next to a window and singing a song. Um, the set included a 24-track recording studio in a truck outside a huge soundstage on the 20th Century Fox lot, where they were live capturing the music and mixing it and balancing it in real time. So you
Oh,
can see why was such a huge, like, innovative thing that he was doing. And I, in my mind, I can't help comparing it to the Star Wars prequels, because while they failed, in my opinion, it was very like innovative of George Lucas to try to do something really new, and it did in fact lead to a lot of innovations after them. So whether those films succeeded or failed, it definitely opens up the gateway for like all kinds of innovations. And I don't know
mm.
if that's true here, but it was definitely ambitious, and I kind of have to give them props for that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, according to the LA Times from 2010, Bochco said it was unbelievably demanding and remarkably difficult, which is one of the things that we were most proud of. There was no dubbing. We had 5 songs per hour. The music had to further the storytelling, and it was virtually impossible to find pre existing music that could accomplish that feat. So, therefore, so that was the end of his quote. So, a large number of collaborators were needed in order to make that work. So, they had a team of 6 songwriters who weighed in on the musical options for the script. And then a choreographer designed the dance steps. So usually a show would start off with a story meeting with everyone in the room, and then every specialty would go off and create their parts and bring them back. They would have a bunch of song pitches. And
It's
then
just the scale of it is just unthinkable.
I know. Well, and the thing is that the musical numbers are always like radio length. So they're all like 3 minutes long. And sometimes that's fine, but a lot of times it feels way too long for what is being conveyed. So
Yeah.
like many of Botchko's other shows, Cop Rock has a large cast, each character having their own evolving story. And I'm just going to go through a couple so that when you start watching clips here in a minute, you'll know who we're talking about. So we've got the main story of Cop Rock is this character on the left, Detective Vincent LaRusso, who is played by Peter Onorati. Sorry if I said that wrong. He kills a black suspect in episode 1. He shoots him while he's handcuffed in a house.
Yikes.
And we watch him go through an internal affairs investigation and a trial for this. Now, his partner, Detective Donnie Potts, who is an African American guy, witnesses the whole thing. And so he is put in the unfortunate position of having to either cover for his partner and stay behind, like keep up the blue line, or tell the truth. And because of his own race, like he's very worried about, you know, betraying his partner as a cop and that the other cops are going to turn on him. But he also did watch him murder a black man. The man in question who got murdered had literally just killed a cop, which was why he did it. But it becomes this big moral question throughout the whole show. There's a lot of racial undertones in this show. They're not always handled super delicately, but this is what it is. Okay, so then the next subplot is we've got Mayor Louise Plank. She's a Senate hopeful mayor, and she gets a makeover early on in the series, and then she begins dating the somewhat wacky chief of police, Roger Kendrick, played by Ronnie Cox.
Wow. Dick Jones from RoboCop.
That's right. That's right. And then the third major plot is we've got Officer Vicky Quinn, who is played by a 22-year-old Ann Bobby, and she is a very young officer in this show. She's married to a much older Detective Ralph Ruskin, played by Ron McLarty, and he's very insecure, and she's got a super hot young partner named Andy Campo, who is super attracted to her. So you can do the math there about what that's all about. So now I am going to close the slides because I don't really need them anymore. So basically, the songs don't always seem to function like they do in musicals in this show. So the main types of musical numbers in normal musicals are you've got an opening song that sets the scene, describes where we're at, right? Then you've got character songs that are things like I am this or I want this. You've got reprises where a theme recurs with a new twist, a new development in the story. You've got inner monologues and you've got emotional climax songs. Those are character songs. And then you've got songs that tell stories, which are like the exposition or the conflict, sometimes narration, or they're just summarizing what's going on in the plot. Those are less exciting or interesting, but those are the general purposes of songs and musicals. Now, in Cop Rock, most all of the songs are character songs. So it's rarely moving the plot forward or telling us anything we can't otherwise discern. So there are a lot of I am songs. A few examples are the one you alluded to earlier, Conrad, which is there's a child trafficker and he sings a 3-minute song just stating that he is a child trafficker and essentially giving them a job description that he is a child trafficker. You've got a judge telling the accused they're guilty for 3 minutes. You've got a cop spending 3 minutes telling the squad to just be careful out there when you go out for your day. So
It seems that I can see what you mean about 3 minutes is too long. You could do some of these as like 1 minute things that then
yes,
recur as the show goes
yes.
on. Oh, it's the reprise of the Be Careful Out There song, you know?
And it would be really lovely to have music playing lightly in the background and then a character walking along and talking to people and then having a little moment of continuing the song, kind of like Belle does in the beginning of Beauty and the Beast, where she's walking through the town, she's meeting a bunch of people, she talks to them, but then she continues la 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 la, like, you know, but then she talks. There's none of that. It's like
No.
song, dialogue. And so this leads to the main issue for this show, which is that it is very jarring. It is so jarring, Conrad. So main problems, I've summarized them very quickly. One is the tone. So unlike other musical shows and even many Broadway musicals, This show is not set in any locale that naturally really has music or singing. And further, the show covers a lot of highly intense and emotional topics. So, as soon as you start to become invested in the ongoing story, which is actually in many cases quite compelling, you hear the synthy tones of a song getting ready to start, and you're like, oh God, no. Like, you're like, don't sing. The casting is another issue. So there are great singers, but they may not always be great TV actors. So Botchko notes in an interview, he says that he erred on the side of getting good singers, but that many of the actors would otherwise not have been chosen if they didn't have their singing abilities. He didn't call them out, but not always the best actors, I guess is what we're saying.
No, it's a hazard though, because a lot of the time now, when they're trying to sort of rejuvenate the musical and they're putting A-list stars of films in them, and you suddenly discover they're not the greatest singers and dancers. I mean,
Well,
I
I
just
mean,
saw.
I feel like that's fine in some cases.
I think it is. I mean, I saw Timothée Chalamet in Wonka, and his singing voice is perfectly fine. It's not one for the ages, but it's Timothée Chalamet. Who
He's a
cares?
great actor. It's sort of like the Buffy musical, right? Like Sarah Michelle Gellar's not the best singer at all,
No.
but she gives it her all, and the pathos is there because she is this character, and she's still able to convey all of the stuff that she's going through, and so it's a vulnerability to sing. Like it's very nerve wracking to sing in front of people. Like speaking in front of people is one thing, but having sung in front of an audience, it's like that's a whole different level of stage fright.
Mm.
It's very, very vulnerable. I think that leads me to the next issue with this show, which is the medium. So, TV may make the concept of a musical harder to wrap your mind around because it's in your living room versus in this grandiose theater where you may have more of a suspension of disbelief. I personally think it works better in The Singing Detective because everything happening is so surreal that it almost takes you to another place for the music. Whereas Cop Rock pulls you even harder into the grim reality of the world you actually live in and then tries to sing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. um, so the music is not great always either. So, like I mentioned, I'm not a huge Randy Newman fan. He does the opening songs, not in my opinion the best, but also a few of them are noteworthy and fun, okay, but many of them fall flat. And at 3 minutes long, they just make the narrative grind to a complete halt. Um, so, an example is She Chose Me in episode one. This is the older gentleman who's married to the younger woman, and he just sings a song about how grateful he is that his wife married him for 3 minutes as he's sitting still in a chair. It's just, why are we here? So again, even though I don't like Randy Newman's style, usually you can definitely feel a sharp musical decline after the pilot because he wrote a lot of the songs for that versus all the other episodes where he did not. Um, but I will admit that some of these songs have been stuck in my head for a month. So some of them are catchy. I'm not going to lie. And then the last thing I have to say before we start showing some clips is the morality. Okay. So you're never really sure where the show stands on some of these really controversial issues they raise. So they raise them, but then they don't really explore or take a side. And it feels like you kind of would need to because they're so upsetting, right? It just, you don't have to necessarily take a side, but it adds to the confusion that's already there with it being a musical. So is it the show doing the even bad guys can have a valid point of view thing that's become super pervasive in our postmodern landscape, or is it just, pardon the pun, copping out? Like, is it just them saying, here's a thing that could happen, and then they just walk away and leave it sitting there?
Yeah, and that combined with the tone issue that you raised earlier must make this super difficult to watch.
It
So, so,
does.
so when they suddenly burst into a 3 minute synth pop song,
Not all
yeah.
synth pop, as
Oh
I will show
no.
you momentarily. It is all over the map.
Oh great.
Oh, good. So, okay, rather than have me continue to try to explain this to you, because I don't know if I am doing the best job, let me just show you. Okay, so first up, most there are people that you would not expect to be in the show, or maybe you didn't even know that they were in this show. So I'm going to here we go with obviously the evil guys from RoboCop. We've got, you know, Dick Jones and who is Ronnie Cox, and then Emil Antonowski, the melted dude.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
RoboCop is
I've often
also
wondered if he had another role.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. So he is also beginning my list of people who are also ER crossovers. He was Dr. Romano in ER, and if any of you
Oh.
watched the show ER, I watched it religiously. Then you will Romano was a hated character, and this is how they killed him off in ER with a helicopter falling right on his head. Um,
Oh.
and then we
Did
have
he emerge from it melting and screaming? No.
no, but it would have been great if he had, right?
Oh, yeah.
Um, before I move on from RoboCop, I have to point out that it does feel like RoboCop could have been a musical because it actually is. There is, if you look up RoboCop the musical right now, not right now, but after the show ends, you will find that there is a RoboCop musical, and they have what at least they say is Peter Weller and Nancy Allen singing a song called "It's You." So I feel like you could do RoboCop the musical.
Yeah, you really should.
That is the cop rock we need to see.
Yes.
I mean, he could be doing the robot. Just think about it. Okay. Continuing on with ER crossovers, this is CCH Pounder. I don't know why, but I love CCH Pounder, and every time I see her in anything, it just fills me with happiness. She played Dr. Hicks on ER, but she was also on The X Files in the Dwayne Barry episode. She was one of the FBI agents. She was on The Shield. So she's received 4 Primetime Emmy Award nominations. She's a great actress, and I love her in everything. So she is the one of the attorneys. This is Kathleen Wilhoit. I hope I'm saying that right. She plays in this show. She plays a character who gives up her baby for $200 for drug money. But
Oh.
she also was Chloe in ER, where she also abandons her baby because she is this is a thing with this actress. I don't really know what it is, but anyway, she's great. She's a wonderful actress, and I love her in this show. She's my favorite person in this show. She's awesome. And then we have Ernie Hudson in the very first episode. He plays this character called Ozzy. He gets recast after the first episode. We also have Principal Snyder from Buffy, who is Armin Shimmerman. He's also known as being Quark, of course, in Star Trek DS9. And Cheryl Crow
What?
in an episode. Yeah, there she is, singing along, dancing. It's great. We have Brad, the really grumpy dead friend from Soul Taker, who's played by David Freilich. And my favorite, Tony Todd, is in an episode of
Oh,
Opera. I,
there's a baritone for you.
I mean, he doesn't sing, sadly, but
Oh.
just made my day when I saw that. So, all right. So now I have to show you the first of some of the real antics of this show. So get ready, Conrad, because I want to show you. This is my top 10 list. So number 1 was the cameos. Number 2 is the characters. So this character is Chief Kendrick. Now, he is usually played as the comic relief, so not the entire show is quite this zany, but he is also extremely politically incorrect. And this series of clips is going to convey that. So just be ready. I tried to take out the most offensive stuff, but a lot of it's still in there. So just get excited. Here we go.
Oh.
Grab some sky, stranger.
Chief.
Why, you lily-livered sod buster? I ain't afraid of you or nobody else.
Then draw, you varmint.
Oh, you crazy, you sidewinder.
Used to be. A woman was like a horse. You could saddle them up. They never complained. Ride them until they dropped, then put a bullet between their eyes. And get yourself another one.
Oh, my.
Women on top. That's what the future holds, Ozzy. Women governors, women senators. What about women presidents? Are you ready for that? What about a woman chief of police? Osborne, sometimes I think you've got no imagination. I think I'm in love. This woman's gotten under my britches.
What woman, Chief?
The mayor.
And also probably the oldest virgin in North America, outside of a convent.
What?
A virgin. I'm the luckiest man alive. I think that boy's as queer as a $3 bill.
Oh, no.
Say what you will. Sidney White's is one smart Jew. You don't think I know you're black?
Yes. When you talk about getting black malcontents off your back, that's just what I think.
Hell, Ozzy, when I talk about black people, I don't mean you.
Grief.
What I mean is...
I know exactly what you mean, Chief.
You ask any black in my department, ask them what they think of me. Hell, who do you think made Warren Osborne deputy chief, huh?
Yeah.
A white guy, that's who.
Ozzy!
What is it, Chief?
Oh, my God. What a nightmare. All these blacks, they were hanging me for being a racist.
Oh,
And you were the
no.
executioner.
Oh,
Do you really think I'm a racist, Ozzy?
yes.
So, you see what I mean? They raise a lot of huge issues, but then they kind of just don't like make a statement either. Like, and I guess on, like I said, on some levels that's fine, but it's just like, are we supposed to like this character? Because he's kind of seen as being this lovable, fun guy, which is
Yeah, I think
weird. He's
yeah,
not-
I think what they're doing is the 90s thing where you can either look at it and say, okay, the show is clearly not holding this up as a character that's supposed to be admired because so it's fine that he holds these views because the show does not espouse these views. This is
Right.
a character you're supposed to laugh at. But at the same time, you can imagine the generation before just chuckling along and going, yeah, he's right.
Right. Well, and I think that, and I never watched NYPD Blue, but I kind of think that the main character of that show is sort of like this, where he's not a great guy, but he's a great cop. And so it's supposed to kind of, and that's true of the guy who shot the guy who was in custody, right? Like, you're not really ever sure whether they're saying that's a bad thing. I mean, obviously it's a bad thing, but the whole trial, like, spoiler alert, he doesn't end up going to jail for it. He gets released. So, all right. So the next thing on my list is that the show doesn't really like ugly people. So, or maybe it really gets to how it feels to be an ugly person. There's a whole song, like I said, She Chose Me, that I talked about with the ugly older guy. And he says he's ugly. I'm not calling him ugly. He calls himself ugly in the show. And there's also this woman who is the mayor, who is actually Stephen Bochco's wife at the time. At the beginning of the show, they put all this prosthetic stuff on her face and make her look really ugly so that she can have plastic surgery and become beautiful, right? Remember, this is 1990, and I just want you to keep in mind how big this person's hair is. So here is a sequence that shows her transition from ugly duckling to beautiful princess.
I'm guessing
We ran more
glasses
than
are
a dozen
involved.
focus groups, Your Honor.
What was their reaction?
That you were the ugliest woman they ever saw.
They actually used the word ugly?
You were described as being plug ugly, too ugly to live, ugly enough to scare horses and children, and ugly enough to stop trains.
Oh,
So I guess the question is, am I too ugly to be elected senator?
Mayor, in our opinion, right now you are. If you're this physically repugnant, you'll never get the numbers you need.
So what do you suggest I do?
We're leaving the name of a plastic surgeon that we think is the best in the business.
I appreciate your input.
Good morning, Louise. How you feeling?
A little nervous.
All we're going to do here is fix a few of God's little mistakes. Right, people?
Wow.
Oh, whoa, whoa, yeah.
Oh, good. A plastic surgery song.
If you aren't one ugly woman, Mayor, if you aren't the foulest looking buzzard-beaked Gila monster I ever saw.
Oh, wow. She puts on glasses.
Hendrik?
Yeah, just so she can take them off.
Oh, okay.
That's you, Mayor Blake?
In the flesh. Do I take that as a compliment, Chief?
Yes, ma'am. Darn right.
Oh, my.
Yes, I added that song, but the point is that it's pretty hard to watch this woman who, you know, this guy has been just horrible in the way he's talked about her, and as soon as she's pretty, he's totally hot for her. Like, it's just that
Yeah, utterly reprehensible.
it's really horrible. All right. So this next clip, I don't even know how to describe it. It's this sequence alone is to me the craziest 1.5 minutes that I've had in a long time. And I remember it's such a juxtaposition because this character was introduced at the beginning of this episode. It's a woman cop. She is paired with the cute cop who, anyway, she's paired with this male cop, and they go to this call, and she's handling this suspect, and you're like, yeah, she kicks ass. She's pretty awesome. I like her. And then immediately you don't like her, and you'll see why. It's real weird. All right, here we go.
Break it up! Stay back! All right!
Why would he put his hands on your food?
Because I turned my back, that's why. Stand here and be accused of that?
Hey, I already told you once. I'm not going to tell you again.
Well, I'm willing to die over a bucket of chicken. How about that?
Ooh.
You okay?
Yeah, 415's really turned me on. Man, there's just nothing like it. I mean, what a rush. Kinda gets a girl thinking. Heck, I don't know what to do with myself. When my heart starts pumping and my face gets red, there's just one thought in my head. I wanna go bumpty, bumpty.
Oh, my God.
Come on, Campo. Come on and show me your stuff.
Captain, this isn't working out.
That's understatement of the year. He's being raped on the job.
She sexually assaults him on a level like she's super normal, and then all of a sudden she's like, I'm super turned on, and she just sings this, I want to go bumpty bumpty, I want to go woozy woo woo woo. And I'm like, what just happened right then? Like, I don't even and he's literally running away from her. She's like throwing him on the cop car and bouncing him, like trying to hump him on the car. It is the most unhinged thing I feel like I've ever seen. And it begs the question, like, why that isn't one of the clips that people always pull out from this show, because they pull out a couple others, which granted are crazy, but this is to me the craziest thing that happens in this show. I mean,
It gets my vote. My goodness.
all right, so a couple of well, okay, let me just go ahead and here's my masterpiece of just I did a montage. I went through every episode and I just pulled like snippets of the craziest shit, and I literally called it crazy shit. This is an edit of just, I had to include these moments because they're just so weird. I don't know. So here we go. Here's a list of crazy shit from Cop Rock. Some of it's musical, some of it's not. Here we go.
I want to make it clear.
I want to thank the jury.
The jury is a gospel choir.
A VCR, one for you and me. They got a water fountain in the John. Oh,
Oh no.
I ache to hear the doggies sing again.
What?
Oh no! Gentlemen, get in there, still out of here.
Jimmy, my wife. Nasty Nicky. He wants a party with you, baby.
What do you want?
I want you to do it. For me.
I sold my baby.
What?
I sold her for $200.
A Caucasian child, 2 weeks old, in perfect health.
And how much is this gonna cost us?
$11,000.
I'm the
Wow, that's a markup.
tots are us. I give you all the service and no damn fuss.
3 in the lower right quadrant of the skull. Individual seated at 6 o'clock.
Sir, I have a warrant here charging you with 181 of the Penal Code, slavery. I'm afraid both you and your wife are under arrest.
Hoes in my pockets, hoes in my shoes.
And hey,
Oh my.
hey, let's be careful out there. Let's be careful out there.
What about if we put a little child in a deep hole and then you can get them out?
Are you nuts?
I was approached by these very attractive girls who wanted to show their admiration for you their way. Ladies and gentlemen, Brenda and the Bus Monsters.
I need a real man. Give me a car who doesn't shoot right.
What?
Get a man. Be more like a woman.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Woman, and a good saddle. What more could a man ask for?
A great mount.
Oh my.
Hey, good looking, I got what you need. We're gonna give him a night to remember.
The only people talking on the set should be the directors.
Director? I worked on John Ford's classic, The Searchers.
Great.
Great.
Just vote for me in 1992.
Wow.
So
That is
how are you
quite
feeling?
a montage. Yeah, just I kind of want to watch the whole series now.
I know. It's like there's just so much because again, it's so jarring. It means that like in an episode, you are taken from like horrific things to really funny things to like really cringy things, like within a matter of very like minutes. Like you're just slammed violently for like a roller coaster ride of emotions, and it never stops. Like you don't know where you're going next, and you can't possibly predict it.
It's just bare millimeters away from Police Squad.
It really is. Like it's all right. So, the next thing on my list is episode names. So I'm not going to tell you all of them, but I just picked my 3 favorite episode names. The first one is Oil of Olay, which I assume is because it's the one where the mayor is saying she's the oldest virgin. She's like, I assume it's because either the mayor or the chief is considered an old lay. So it's Oil of Olay. The next one is Copophiliac, which is bad on so many levels. Like, I assume they're going for coprophiliac, which is terrible, but also copophile isn't great, and it's a play on cops. So it's just like a triple decker of a horrible whatever.
Yes, it's a car crash.
And then the next to last episode is the one where the chief of police has the nightmare about all the black people hanging him, and it's called No Noose is Good Noose.
Oh, good grief! In a show that evokes lynching imagery, great.
Yeah. So number 7 on my list is things you would never think could be a musical are musical. So here's a list of some of the things that happen in this show that are actual songs. Okay, we've got a funeral scene that's a song. It's at the very beginning. It's when the cop gets shot. So it's like the second episode starts with a whole sing along in the church. You've got sexual harassment, which we just saw with Bumpty Bumpty. We've got the police lineup of Latino men who it's very Latin dance, right? And so they're in a police lineup situation and they're all, I don't even know if they're all actually of that ethnic group, right? But they are sort of made up to look that way. And then they do a lot of Latin dancing. So it's just very on the nose. You've got a domestic violence situation where the cops get called when a man's like beating his wife, and then they show up, and then the wife and husband sing to each other.
Oh, of course.
You've got the plastic surgery scene where the mayor was getting plastic surgery. I was going to show part of it, but he has like this like backup group of sexy nurses, and each one of them has like a bright color. So like one is in all like neon green, one's in like hot pink, and they're all like super hot, like 80s looking Hollywood type people dancing. You've got
Not that far from the singing detective in that case.
right, exactly. That's the part that actually did kind of remind me of that scene a little bit.
Yeah.
And they actually use a lot of Dutch angles because I noted in The Singing Detective, they use a lot of Dutch angles to good effect because Dutch angle is when the camera's tilted a little bit to one side, and it's usually meant to convey like everything feels off kilter, which this show is definitely off kilter most of the time. So it's good. There's a whole plot line about celebrity stalking. So I don't know if you remember the girl from My Sister Sam. There was a TV show here called My Sister Sam, and the girl who played her, I think her name is Rebecca. Can't remember her last name right now. But she was murdered by a stalker. This was like one of the main reasons why celebrities' names and addresses, or they're like where they live, is now hidden because it used to be public information. You could just go and find out where a celebrity lived, like at the courthouse or whatever, and this guy found out where she lived and murdered her. But that's what's happening in this particular episode is kind of the same thing. There's a child who gets, and when I say child, I mean like a 9-year-old who gets murdered in a drive-by shooting. His body is still lying on the ground when the cops arrive, and it's in a black neighborhood, so like all of the community is like out staring at this child. The mother is having like an emotional meltdown, of course, understandable, right? And she turns it into this big song while the kid his body is still laying there. There's one where it's in a bar and there's a racist cop telling another cop why he should also be racist. And it's a song, and it's just hard to watch. There's the scene I showed you, the two scenes where like particularly the one where they're getting ready to like basically get a lot of the female cops to dress up like sex workers, go out and like get Johns to come up to them and then arrest them. So a sting operation. But the way they lead into that is they have the most attractive female cop come up and sing this sexy song to like the Dr. Romano guy, the guy from who looks like the Toxic Avenger at the end of RoboCop. And then we've got a family finding a cross burning on their lawn. This is the cop who didn't want to testify against his partner because of this. So he walks outside and there's like a cross burning on his lawn, and his wife and young children come out and they start singing a song in that moment. And you're just like, this is horrific and scary. And like these kids are crying and they're singing. I think
there's that tone issue.
The most upsetting of all of them. But yeah, so it's just off the rails. There are, now I will say one really nice thing about the show. So there are a few musical moments that really do land. And my favorite is this one that I'm going to show a small part of, by Kathleen Wilhoit. Um, and so this is the woman who, she's a drug addict, and there's a drug bust at the very beginning of the first episode, and there's the police with almost like a tank, and they ram the door down at this crack house. It's middle of the crack epidemic thing, whatever. And she's in there with her baby, and so she's kind of like not housed, and so she ends up like not having any money, and she's begging the lady cop for like help to help her have somewhere to live, and she's also still on drugs, and they don't really help her, so that's why she sells her baby to the baby merchant.
Oh yeah.
And but so this is the moment where she has just sold her baby. The baby merchant has just driven off with her baby. And so she's really, really sad, but she didn't see that she had a whole lot of other options. So it's really, really sad. And this is Kathleen.
Close your eyes now, my little girl. Go to sleep, my little baby. Sandman's coming soon, you know he's coming soon.
So that song, that one gets stuck in my head a lot. And Randy Newman apparently reused this song for his musical comedy adaptation of Faust. I think it's funny that Kathleen, like I said, she almost always is cast as a drug addict or an irresponsible mom who abandons her kid. And that's true here as well as in ER, and even in her role in The Gilmore Girls, among others. And but she's got one of the best performances in the show. It's this one, and there's another one that she does as well that's just really compelling. She's crying. She's kind of breaking down when she's singing this song. And she talks about when they filmed this, that they were actually in like Watts or Compton at that time, and it was getting dark. And in the scene right before, I almost showed this, but there's like, she's actually holding a real baby. It's not like a baby doll, but it's like a real very young infant. And so they were like, we're out there, we have this baby, it's like getting dark, and it's in this kind of scary area for all of them. And so they were not able to do any retakes, so she had to do all of that in essentially one take.
Wow.
And it's all like live singing, so that's why it's super impressive, because they're outside, there are buses driving by, people walking by in the background that you can see in the clip. It's just, how did they get that recording to be so good? I don't know. So again, more themes that are in the show I just kind of want to talk about, and these are like longer running themes. So we've got police brutality that gets explored, racism, obviously, misogyny, homophobia, drug addiction, and child trafficking. So these are not themes that lend themselves to wild, wacky hijinks, also followed by singing, then followed by someone getting murdered. Like, it's so hard to emotionally go there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can fully explain to you, but I'm doing my best what it's like. The last thing I will say about this show, my number 10, is the ending. I was not expecting this ending. So the show wraps, the guy, LaRusso gets, like I said, he doesn't go to prison, so he gets set free. He goes up to his old partner. He's like, "Hey, I'd love to be your partner again. No hard feelings, whatever." And the partner is like, "No hard feelings, huh? Like, everyone hates me now, and I didn't ask for any of this. Like, my family's been put through hell. I've been put through hell. I had to get a lawyer. All this stuff, and you're the one who did this." So he punches him in the face. And right after that scene comes this scene.
I can't believe they cancel us.
Yeah, I know. I only got to sing one song.
2.
Excuse me, 1.
I only got 1 song the whole time.
Well, you're not really a singer.
I started in this business as a singer. This was a great job. I love my character. I'm gonna miss the people.
Yeah, me too. Well, I guess it ain't really over till...
Till the fat lady sings. Bye bye bye, baby. Goodbye
Oh.
to you, my friend. We'll ride
Well, that's going out in style.
Yeah, they have this whole, like, they have a bunch of microphones. Every person on the cast gets up and sings part of the song. Goodbye to you, goodbye, my friend, all this stuff. Crazy fourth wall breaking level of, like, and kind of guilt tripping the audience a little bit for not watching the show, I think.
So they knew they were being cancelled.
Oh, they knew by the fourth episode.
Right. Wow.
They did 11. They aired 11 episodes. I think the last episode aired on December 26th of 1990. So right after Christmas. I don't know if anybody was even watching that episode. After researching the show so much, I was so curious about how the crew all felt about it when it was actually canceled. And so I did find out there's a great AV Club article where they like went and found all the people who were in Cop Rock and talked to them. And so I got a few quotes that I thought were interesting to sort of go out on. So Kathleen Wilhoit, the lady who sold her baby, she says, quote, it was very much poised to be phenomenal. So it was a shock that people turned it into a giant joke and responded like, this is the worst show ever created. I was like, really? It's that bad? I felt like I did a fine job. I tried hard and I didn't feel embarrassed about my work or the show at all. So I didn't really get the sense that it was going to be this huge joke. That was the hardest part. I was actually bummed out that people didn't like it. That was really sad to me, unquote.
Yeah.
And Stephen Bochco, for his part, he acknowledges that the show, he knows that no one liked the show and that it was a horrible flop and all these things, but he just really loves the show. Like, but he says, quote, I could see it after the first episode. The ratings started out really, really low, which meant that people were turned off simply by the promos because nobody had even seen it yet. It just wasn't. It wasn't just that it was a low number. When you looked at it in 15-minute intervals, you could see it sinking like a rock. So it started out really low, and then it got lower by the week. And I think by week 7, they'd pulled the plug. So I guess it was wrong. Week 7. So
yeah, Jason Anderson in the comments said that he got 15 minutes in and he was out.
Yeah, it's rough. Like, I'm glad that I stuck with it because there are some real gems in there. But yeah, so Ann Bobby, who is the younger cop lady, she says everyone was pulled to meet in the squad room for a meeting, and folks were kind of laughing because they all suspected what was coming. And then it got really quiet, and Bochco said, well, we're canceled. And then Bochco was told by Bob Iger that the show would have been picked up and succeeded without the music because it had a lot of really interesting narrative ideas, which is true. Like, I really do think that, you know, Stephen Bochco is really good at writing this kind of a drama. And so, anyway, people have used this show as a cautionary tale against boldness as well as a reminder not to put too many ingredients in your premise. I think that's part of it. He sort of feels like too much stuff in there. Like, pick something. Anyway, he says, Bochco says, I'm sorry it didn't work, but I've never been ashamed of it or embarrassed by Cop Rock. The few people that really like it are going to enjoy the hell out of it, and people who thought it was ridiculous will probably still think so. But I thought it was a very bold, adventurous attempt at something, and to whatever degree some small portion of the audience really got into it, I'm delighted. So there you go. That's Cop Rock. Take from that what you will, people. I don't know. It's what are your thoughts on that, Conrad?
Well, it is a brave attempt, but I mean, it's funny because I've just finished editing the first episode of Movie Oubliette for the year, which is on Kevin Costner's The Postman. And one of the things that our guest Mikey Newman points out on that is, didn't Kevin Costner have an optics guy? Didn't he have somebody in the room that was saying, don't do this. Don't have you as yourself set up as a messianic character and have a statue erected with a scene in slow-mo with your own kid. Just don't do this. And it just makes you wonder, as you say, tonally, you could be brave and create a musical about all kinds of subject matter, but not these topics.
Yeah,
it's too hard of a
I feel like you might
clash.
be able to do it if you picked one of those things. You can't do all of those things on TV. Like, the only way you could do that would to do something at the level of like Hamilton on Broadway or Rent or something like that, where they are tackling some social issues, but again, it's not usually 15 social issues.
Yeah, no. Yeah, and you need to do it very cleverly. I mean, if as you say, the songs don't further the narrative or the themes, they're just the character songs and just repeat for 3 minutes. That's just smacks of somebody who's really great at writing TV drama, but just does not know how to write a musical. And maybe all of the shows should have been written in collaboration with people who knew how to do musicals well in advance. I mean, it is possible to do. If you watch something like Mrs. Maisel on Amazon,
that's a great
it doesn't go full musical, but there are sequences in it that are just inches away from being. It's incredible the way they're choreographed, and they're all oneers in some cases. It's just beautiful to watch. But that's something that's meticulously written by an incredibly talented woman,
right?
Prior to them filming all of it. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the people who worked on the show, almost every single one of them, absolutely loved the show, and they all were such good friends. They would all hang out together. They said it was the best job they've ever had. They loved it, but it is not. I mean, you saw it, so take away what you will. So, I have a few super chats. So, Wicked Person says, back in the day, I vowed to never see a single snippet of Cop Rock, and until today, I hadn't. I watched every episode.
I'm so sorry.
I'm not sorry. Everyone should see a little Cop Rock. He said he watched every episode of The Singing Detective and the remake, though. So there you go.
Ah, okay. I'd love to hear what you think about it.
Yeah. And Analog Toys, Tony, he says, I'm finally awake early enough to catch Dreamland live. So I don't know how you feel about that now, Tony, if you're still with us or not. But Wildstar Studio says there was a Broadway musical from 1966 called It's a Bird, It's a Plane, It's Superman, which was adapted for TV in 1975. It's as bad as it sounds.
And yeah, it's kind of like the Spider-Man musical. That didn't go too well either.
Right. Well, and I feel like I know Heathers was made into a musical as well. Like
and Carrie, that's another subject matter I can't quite figure out how that
I
would
have
work.
a hard time. Like, I feel like you could do Mean Girls the musical, but not Heathers.
Well, they have. I mean, there's now a movie of Mean Girls the musical too. So
yeah, it's just
full circle.
That's right. And then finally, we have Wicked Person saying Cop Rock is kind of blurred together in my memory with the Hat Squad from the same era. Blech. So I remember Cop Rock from when it came out, and I actually watched an episode. I don't know if it was the first episode, but David Letterman had a constantly running gag on his show about Cop Rock, and it's sort of burned into my mind. Like, everyone did make fun of it, like all the night talk shows did at the time. So it was kind of doomed, I think, from the get-go. But yeah,
you need an optics guy. You need somebody that you can just show, hey, I want to do this, and you should have someone you can trust who can give you the hard answers to say, don't do that.
Well, a lot of people told him not to do it, but he was gonna do it. He wanted to do it. He believed in it. Stephen Bochco just really believed in this, and he recently passed not that long ago. But I mean, even until like in the DVD, he has a whole interview in there where he talks about, I still really love the idea. I think it could work. I just think people, didn't like it, and that's okay. But there you go. All right, so Any last thoughts, Conrad, on the singing detective and or cop rock?
Well, I'm really glad that doing this show, that we had this idea while we were together. I wish we could brainstorm more shows that way.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I've seen both of these shows for the first time as a result of that conversation for very different reasons.
It's a wonderful point.
Yes.
It was a very fun conversation. Just to see the look on your face when I said cop rock, just the name alone in real time was very gratifying. So, yeah. So this is now we're in 2024. So this is season 3 of our show. We're going every year as a new season. So this is season 3, episode 1 of Dreamland. And so we will be back. We will be back February 24th, which is, as usual, the last Saturday of the month, with our next show. Conrad, what is the title for our next show?
Our next show,
one-word title.
Yes. So the word of the month is going to be waves.
Let me show the image there. Waves. Waves.
So yeah, just think on that and imagine what we could be talking about. I have to say, this is, I think, the last time we'll be doing this guessing game thing, because we did a poll on Patreon where we asked all of our patrons what aspects of the show they really enjoy, that they'd like us to focus on, and which they don't like so much. And the guessing game came out last, so we'll stop doing it after this one and focus more on the other things people do like. But if you do like this feature and you love it, there's still a chance to save it before next time. So if you do, then email us or
we'll reconsider. But yeah, we already had this beautiful artwork put together before the poll results were in, so we're definitely using it. But yeah, so please shout out in the comments, or preferably even send me a quick message on social media or at the Dreamland Podcast at gmail.com to let us know if you want us to keep it, and we'll possibly reconsider. But yeah, it is a lot of time and effort we put into like putting these together. So yeah, just wanted to know. But this does wrap up this episode of Dreamland. You can find our show notes with all the links actually in the description of this video. I've already put the references down there, so we've got all of those in there. They're in APA format. Just go crazy with it. So until the next Dreamland, which is again the last Saturday in February, you can follow me and Conrad on Retroblasting and Movie Oubliette respectively on all social media outlets. And you can email us, like I said a moment ago, at thedreamlandpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.
Be careful out there.